Hello, and welcome to What Am I Doing, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast where one experienced dungeon master and one failed scriptwriter discuss D&D topics. My name is Kinsey, and my ridiculously inadequate pod partner is...
McCaffery. See, Connor, I was prepared for you that time. I was ready.
I do actually have a surprise for you, though. How's your week been?
Been okay, now I'm a little concerned, but it's been good.
Do you know the average lifespan of a shrew is the length of a killer whale?
No,
Consider
but now
yourself
I do.
surprised.
Yeah,
it's not
I am
true,
surprised.
But now you're double surprised.
Oh, okay,
So-
yeah. You got me there and bamboozled.
There we go. This is why it's important to be my friend.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, this week's topic is building character. Let's get to it. So, today's topic is how can players create a character that feels real and takes on a conscious position in a campaign or server, for instance. As you can tell, an adult wrote this. I don't know those words, and I can't formulate them correctly in a sentence. As always, I'm going to give you a scenario that in some way relates to the topic.
I'm ready.
This isn't our third attempt. But you don't know them but you don't know them in advance before we record.
Before the first attempt.
So there is a glimmer of surprise and hope, maybe lust.
No, a little bit.
Okay, Lewis. I was raised to assume that my identity means nothing. I am worthless. I am but a worm in long grass. But I want to be someone. What am I doing? How does my wormy character feel real to me?
See, this is the third time I'm hearing it, and I still have no idea what any of that means. But boiling it down to how to make a good character, how does that fit into a setting? I think the number one thing to remember is that it's important to have a character who has depth to them. Someone who, yes, they can be great at one thing, terrible at another. You don't have to have a character that is the main character. It is a team game. It's important to play to your strengths, but also be aware that what you're bad at, someone else will be good at. And that's what it means to be in a campaign with different personalities, different people, and have them all gel together. It's like, for example, in the campaign you're running right now, Connor, what do you think of the mismatch of characters? Do you think they work well together? Do you think that's because of the actual characters themselves with all of their flaws and what they're good at?
I think, yeah, the characters almost don't work for the world. Mm-hmm. But the players are very, and they'll probably never hear this podcast, so I'm not complimenting them. But they work really well in kind of any role that we've experienced, whether it's playing as a DM for them or alongside them as a regular player. And so they make like the difficult situations work for a character that in other ways wouldn't be in that world. Which does go on to my next question, actually, which is, are there types of builds that fit in a certain setting and not in another?
Not necessarily. You'll always have builds that are more difficult to fit into certain settings. For example, in the Curse of Strahd campaign, if you're going to have a character who is so full of life and joy and looks on the bright side of everything, they are going to struggle in Barovia. They're going to have a very difficult time. As you know yourself, even in the first few sessions, it can be pretty bleak.
I did die about 13 times, I think, in like 3 sessions.
Vampire spawns will do that to you. But yeah, that's not to say that a lovable bard, for example, just shouldn't be played in a Curse of Strahd campaign or some kind of gothic horror. That just means that whilst you might have a difficult time adjusting, it also gives you the range and the ability to have a lot of character growth. And I think it depends largely on whether the player is ready and open to that. And it's just, I think a discussion would need to be had between the DM and the player about what type of campaign or what type of setting that they are throwing this character into.
Yeah, it really is about the player making the most out of the character rather than relying on the narrative or the DM to do it. It's obviously helpful for the DM should be like a guide in my eyes. You know, like you set things up to enable them to then think it was them who was like, oh, this is a good idea for my character. But sometimes the player does just have that, and that's almost the better side of it, I think. But the player also needs to kind of commit rather than think they are and blame everyone around them in the scenarios, or and actually go, would my character do this? And that in itself is growth.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of DMs run a session 0, to give that kind of early guidance to players.
So what about like creativity? Is there room for it once you've selected a race and a class? Can you expand upon it, or do you think you're expected to kind of stick to the alignment that you've chosen or been given? Your character is this, like, as a lizard folk, so they're not expected to be good around people. Like, is it worth challenging that if you've got a good enough plan for a backstory and how you can expand upon what these characters aren't born when we start the campaigns, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's nothing wrong with having a character or a race that clashes with the standard, with the expectation of what, like you said, a lizard folk or a Githyanki or whatever the race may be. There are obviously some races which are inherently seen within D&D as different. There's nothing wrong with challenging that, but for me personally, I think if you are going to do that, it's always better to have a strong backstory behind you. Like you said, characters aren't born right before as a session starts. What has your character been through from birth to this point? What has made them the way that they are? But that's not to say that creativity should be limited in any way in that respect, because I think having that variety can make for some very, very interesting moments in campaigns or sessions, not just with NPCs, but with other players as well. You might have a human fighter that hates Githyanki because one of their family members was murdered by one, and then they meet another player character and it's a Githyanki that is actually an Oath of Devotion paladin. So there's definitely room for it, and if anything, I think it should be encouraged, but with a good backstory and with reasoning behind it, I think. So what about you? I know you're quite a creative person when it comes to writing or creating characters.
I do paint all over my walls, actually. I do write my stats for every new character.
On your wall?
In the living room.
Oh, okay. I wondered what those marks were.
Yeah. Oh, the help is actually health.
Nice. Okay. Did the pen run out of ink at that point, I'm guessing?
Yeah, just that H.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did put a question mark, so it was important.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I guess coming from a like a screenwriting background, or attempting to, I actually think the background makes a lot of sense, that the characters don't exist when we begin. Like, they do because we've created them, but you never start a character as like a baby. You are literally starting a character where they've got some kind of backstory, they've got a reason to be here, hopefully on this quest or for whatever. But I do think if you watch films, they usually kind of have everything's fine, right? It's an equilibrium. Like, Luke has a really boring, tedious life, but he's happy to be with his aunt and uncle, and obviously it's not exciting for him as a teenager, but and then he gets kind of thrown into a quest. Yeah. So I think that can also work for character development, where we do go, right, like you said earlier, this human fighter doesn't like Githyankis because a family member was slaughtered by them. But as you did say, they might come across a Githyanki that actually happens to be like over devotion paladin. I think that's what you said.
I'm impressed.
I'm listening. I know it's a podcast where someone speaks, someone listens is like incredible, right? But yeah, that in itself is a stepping stone that they might not have expected until you brought it along. And that is almost like their forward story. Like, it's something that they can look forward to. That's a terrible term. It's not real. I've just made it up, as you can tell. But they can change based on what happens. I think where there isn't room for development, and this is me being really like, this isn't how it should be, but at least for me making a character, or be very disappointed with people if they do it, you're out there, is people who just decide when it just changes for no reason. And I think that's very different, where they've just decided they need a bit of an arsehole pass.
Yes.
You know, they're not this. Their alignment's not this. They didn't have this. Mm-hmm. In the moment, it just feels right, so they can break some rules. And I do see that quite frequently.
Oh, yeah.
And we all do it, right? You know, no one plays GTA and stops at the red lights unless they're...
I love doing that every now and then.
When you were like 15, when you were at your most anarchic stage.
It was last week.
Yes. Well, yeah, it was his birthday 3 weeks ago. But yeah, I think there is room for creativity. I don't think it's all in the backstory. Mm-hmm. I do think it's a very good start.
Yeah.
But there is room for it if it can be supplied in the right way.
Yeah.
You know, for what's going on, not because they feel like it.
One thing to do with backstories, I think, is important to remember is that everyone loves a good tragic backstory, but it's not needed. Like, don't get me wrong, I mean, I've got characters that have, like, mortifyingly tragic backstories. Or at least I like to think they are. But it's really not needed. Like you said, it could literally be like Luke Skywalker sitting on a farm all his life, and then he gets a call to adventure. That can be enough.
Yeah, it doesn't always need to be like a village massacre.
Yeah.
To send them on their way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, with that, today's adventure is sadly coming to a close, but we are back again next week with the topic, who do you think you are? I've been Connor.
I've been Lewis.
And good day.
Goodbye.